Hello, it's me, the kid, and today we are going to go through a hell. Well, we're going to do the worst movies of 2018 list right now. And I have to say, this year has surprised me with a few really bad movies. And keep in mind that these choices are based off my own personal opinions and experiences, so no hard feelings here. So let's go straight to the list. With number 10, we got Robin Hood. First of all, this movie doesn't have a natural structure, a character development, nor a normal pacing to be taken seriously. It still tried to be too serious and deny itself that how ridiculously absurd and bad it really was. Because of that, the movie feels so plastic and inauthentic that it was more like a compilation of an experimental action pieces than anything else. Funny enough, the accessories didn't seem to match the century they were in at all, with all those automatic arrow guns and costumes almost like from the front cover of the latest Vague. It's ironic that the movie is about the greedy rich people who take away the money from the poor people. Well, watching this movie is basically the same. I paid my money to watch this pile of poo, even though I don't consider myself poor. But the bottom line is that as I did that, they got their greedy nature satisfied, while I was just sinking into my chair of cringiness. And in the 9th place, we have The Darkest Minds. I was incredibly surprised that this movie was so incapable to entertain at any sort of way possible. Don't get me wrong, there was a few noteworthy sequences here and there, like the car chase scene for example, but overall the whole movie slaps itself to the concrete head first, bringing nothing new or remarkably considerable to the audiences whatsoever. This movie doesn't answer the questions that we as an audience constantly get from this delusive experience, and after they boldly mention something roughly to the topic itself, it creates even more questions later on. The Darkest Minds was basically a giant setup and a cheap shot to kickstart a franchise for the unconcentrated teens to feast on. The movie is underwhelming in entirety, and the ridiculously open ending makes you want to ask for your money back. Coming up in the 8th place is Hotel Transylvania 3 Summer Vacation. Easily the worst animated movie of the year, with its incredibly confusing storytelling and the incoherent plot itself. Compared to the earlier installments, this movie doesn't give a flying kite about anything and does an extremely questionable stuff, which doesn't even make sense from the story point of view whatsoever. Considering that it is a kids movie, it had more sexual tension than the most of the animations of all time, but here that aspect was more visibly showcased with a various different techniques. Yeah, it did make me chuckle a bit, but not because of its funny nature, but because of its cringiness. And that music battle in the end, just give me a break. And the next one is Terminal. The extremely big name cast and reasonably well shot entirety didn't save this movie from the disaster that was boiling in the kettle slowly but surely. It took me about a half of the movie to get a grip of the main plot and the direction they were heading for, because the storytelling was just straight on awful, mainly from the structural point of view. Also, the characters were ridiculously undercooked. Because of what, I didn't give a single bollocks for them or their misfortunes, to be honest with you. Terminal is basically this year's The Snowman, with a little Atomic Blonde vibe attached to it. It looked compelling, yeah, but it just wasn't that at all. And coming up in the 6th place is A Wrinkle in Time. Oh god. This movie basically was a poor man's hybrid between The Darkest Minds and Alice in Wonderland, which seems to be written by a 4-year-old kid apparently. It contained a compilation of the most used cliches and incoherencies of the film industry along the way. I genuinely could sense from the screen that the actors didn't really care much about the movie itself. I think the money check was the main purpose to their attachment to this project, as it really was just an extremely unintelligent train wreck overall. Save yourself from this bullet, please. And in the 5th place we have Dark Crimes. Well, Dark Crimes was really interesting piece to witness, as I hadn't ever seen Jim Carrey so serious in any of his roles. Well, I haven't seen all of his movies, so that explains my curiosity for this. Either way, in this movie he seemed to be extremely serious character, and he did it remotely pleasingly okay-ish, if I could say that. But the problem wasn't quite there, to be honest. The biggest problems lurked in the script. The movie sets up so many flaws straight away from the beginning that it couldn't recover from them, even though it tried a few times to think outside the box and progress from there. This movie tried so hard to be a thought-provoking with its sensitive topics and useless plot twists that the only thing that this movie really twisted was itself. Don't waste your time on this. Just don't. And in the 4th place we have the 1517 to Paris. Even though this movie deals with a real and truly heroic story, it seems like the crew didn't understand how the story was supposed to be told effectively and what was the main points that led up to this heroic action. The movie was not bad because the unexperienced but real heroes of the event were cast to play themselves on the big screen, but because it didn't seem to understand what it's supposed to tell about this particular event. The premise of the movie was lost immediately in the beginning, as the unnecessary traveling vlog montages and poorly developed stories of the characters basically felt like a fillers for the rest of the movie. Very unentertaining and uninspiring movie to sit through. In the 3rd place we have Gotti. Oh man, Gotti was an interestingly told story, as it didn't seem to have any structure to its plot whatsoever. I don't know how they got their ideas for the order of the scenes for this movie, but let me say that it was like a poorly stacked jigsaw puzzle, which felt like it was confusing itself more than the audience. I just laughed straight on for half of the movie because of its abysmal storytelling and just laughably disastrous technical execution. Many faces of Travolta made me kinda pity for him, as this apparently was his passion work. For what I have to give him points for trying to tackle his dream role, but I think he tackled it that effortlessly that even that on its own couldn't be the only entertaining factor of the movie. And coming up in the 2nd place we have The Open House. I'll keep my opinion on this movie very short but dramatically slicing. The Open House was the first Netflix original of the year and also easily the worst one of them all. Even though I had no expectations or hopes for it in advance, it still surprised me with its remarkably atrocious script and the ridiculously dumb execution of telling it. The movie was filled with the scenes where the protagonist found something off-putting in their house and started to investigate it. When the intensity built up for the release, the scene just stopped there, and our protagonist literally walked out of the basement where he saw something off-putting and just forgets the situation like nothing ever happened. And well, also it was one big horror cliche festival which tried to be thrilling and fascinating, but the execution was just horrible. And before we go to the worst movie of 2018, here are some dishonorable mentions. And And the worst movie of 2018, in my opinion, was The Little Mermaid. Wow. This movie literally took one of the most magical fairy tales there is and turned it to one of the most uninspiring and cheap-looking adaptations I have ever witnessed on the screen. It had literally nothing to do with the famous fairy tale itself, excluding the animated part in the beginning, where it told briefly about the legend itself. Just avoid this movie if you have a chance, as it doesn't seem to have anything remotely entertaining to tell at all. One of the easiest half stars I have given this year. Period. And here was my list for the worst movies of 2018. What did you think about my list? Show me your list in the comments down below. I want to see them too. I actually want to talk about them because some of these movies were just ridiculously bad. There will be free listing videos coming up about this year in the coming days or weeks, but they are coming, so stay tuned, subscribe to get notified about them, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers.